So I want you to imagine just for a second that you are experiencing like the most incredible, vibrant, earth-shaking night of your entire life.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about a night where every single sense is just dialed up to 11.
Yeah.
You are surrounded by this massive community of people moving in total sync. The energy in the room is just borderline electric.
Right.
And the music is like literal physical force vibrating in your chest.
Yeah.
And you know with absolute certainty that you're going to remember this feeling forever.
It's one of those rare, perfect moments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But before you walk into this space, you are handed one very strict, unbreakable rule. You have to leave your camera at the door.
Ooh, that's tough.
Right. No smartphones, no audio recorders, absolutely no digital footprint whatsoever.
None.
So when the sun comes up and that space clears out, leaving nothing but, I don't know, empty warehouse or a quiet patch of woods, how do you prove any of it actually happened? Like, how do you explain the sheer magnitude of that experience to someone who wasn't there?
I mean, it is a genuinely terrifying thought for the modern mind, honestly. We are so entirely accustomed to outsourcing our memories to our camera rolls.
Oh, boy.
If we don't have the photo, we almost doubt our own lived experience. Without that undeniable proof, an experience that profound feels incredibly vulnerable, almost as if it's at risk of just evaporating into thin air the second you walk away.
Yeah, and that vulnerability, that specific tension between a massive earth-shaking cultural movement and the complete lack of official documentation that is our mission for our deep dive today.
It's a great topic.
It really is. We are pulling from this really insightful September 2025 article published by Monumental Movement Records, or MMR, and the piece is titled, "Can Zines Save Rave? The Potential of DIY Media as a Memory Device."
It operates as just a fantastic piece of cultural archaeology, really.
Okay, let's unpack this, because
Yeah.
the core paradox that this MMR article lays out is that early raves were essentially instant festivals.
Right.
They were designed from the ground up to be celebrated purely, like 100% in the here and now.
Yeah, the present moment.
Exactly. But because the culture was so rigidly focused on existing only in the present moment, they inadvertently created this massive threat to their own survival.
Mhm.
Like, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hits record, the historical legacy of that tree is in serious jeopardy.
What's fascinating here is that the discussion expands far beyond just electronic music or warehouse parties. The article uses this specific underground scene to examine the fragile nature of memory itself.
Hmm.
It forces us to ask how marginalized or, underground cultures build their own unique and sometimes highly chaotic memory storage devices when mainstream society just entirely shuts them out.
Yeah, and to really understand the brilliant solution this culture came up with, we first have to, like, wrap our heads around the sheer scale of the problem.
Right.
We're talking about a global culture, particularly in the 1990s, that was basically undocumented by mainstream media. It functions almost like cultural dark matter.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, historians can't see the core of it directly because there's so little official footage, but we know it existed because we can measure its massive gravitational pull on modern fashion, music, and art.
That dark matter analogy is actually highly accurate because the obscurity was completely intentional.
It was on purpose.
Completely. The article makes it very clear that these early underground raves actively, aggressively resisted being recorded for a few deeply ingrained logistical and philosophical reasons.
Right.
The primary barrier was just a strict cultural taboo against photography. Bringing a camera into a 90s underground rave wasn't just considered, like, rude. It was a fundamental violation of the ethos of the space.
Right, because that space was supposed to be a sanctuary, completely detached from the judgment of the outside world.
The equipment was often just outright banned at the door to protect the sanctity of the environment.
And that ties directly into the harsh logistical reality of the era, too.
Yeah.
I mean, many of these events were entirely unsanctioned. Organizing massive parties in abandoned warehouses or suburban fields meant that, well, avoiding police and administrative crackdowns was just a practical necessity for the night to even happen.
Exactly.
And just to be absolutely clear for our listeners, we're just reporting the historical conditions described in the source material here.
Yeah.
We aren't endorsing any illegal activities or taking a stance on law enforcement. We're just laying out why secrecy was such a big deal. Leaving behind photographic or recorded evidence wasn't just uncool, it was a massive liability.
Yeah. Survival meant operating in complete anonymity. You cannot leave a paper trail if you want the party to happen again next weekend.
Right.
But beyond the logistics, the article dives into a much more philosophical barrier to documentation, which is the transience of the event itself. The magic of the floor only existed in that singular moment. It was, the physical vibration of the bass in an illegal forest rave that only lasted until dawn. It was the wordless resonance shared in smoke-filled infrared light. The culture was just inherently ephemeral.
It's like trying to document that with a standard camera would be like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands.
That's exactly it.
You might catch the trees bending, but you miss the actual force of the wind. And the real historical tragedy, the article points out, is that without audio, without video, and without any official administrative records, the true shape of this entire culture was on the brink of being completely severed from future generations.
Yes.
The historical timeline was just fractured.
Which creates a massive archival void. If the mainstream media ignores it and the participants themselves are barred from photographing it, the culture effectively does not exist in the official historical record.
Yet the culture survived.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about it today. So if official media, journalists, and even personal cameras were totally banned, how did the memory of these nights make it all the way to 2025?
Right, that's the big question.
And the MMR article argues that the answer lies in a medium that was just as rebellious, just as untamed, and just as deeply physical as the Raves themselves, the zine.
Short for magazine, naturally.
Naturally. And for those who might not be intimately familiar with the format, the MMR article paints a really vivid picture of what a zine actually was.
It was incredibly grassroots.
Completely. It describes an entire communication network constructed out of cheap paper, staples, and local photocopiers. It was totally free from commercialism, free from giant corporate printing presses, and crucially, it thrived right before the widespread adoption of the internet.
Yeah, it represents the ultimate distillation of DIY media. Do it yourself. The text draws a direct, vital parallel between the use of zines in the rave scene and their historical importance in other marginalized subcultures. The 90s punk scene, the riot grrrl feminist movements, skater culture.
Right? All of those.
In all these spaces, the zine served as the urgent alternative to a mainstream media apparatus that either ignored their existence or just wildly misrepresented their values.
I hear that parallel, I really do. But I have to push back a little on the core premise of this article. Because when I read the description of these specific rave zines, I found myself getting genuinely skeptical.
Really? How so?
Well, the article describes them as being made of frantic handwritten notes, cut-and-paste layouts, completely free-form structures. If a zine is just random essays, glue-stick collages, and unedited thoughts printed at a 24-hour copy shop, isn't it just a messy, chaotic diary?
I see where you're going with this.
Right. If I'm a historian trying to reconstruct the past, I want an objective timestamp video, not someone's subjective, fuzzy memory of a night out. How can that possibly be considered a reliable historical record?
But think about what a time-stamped video actually captures in that specific environment. It captures the geometry of a room and the physical movement of bodies in the dark.
Okay, sure.
It does not capture the cultural significance, the tension, or the emotional resonance of the music. A journalist with a camcorder is an outsider recording the surface.
Oh, I see.
The MMR article argues that to understand an underground movement, objective truth is actually less valuable than subjective truth.
Wait, so the bias isn't a flaw in the historical record, the bias is the entire point of the record.
Exactly. The intense subjectivity is what gives the artifact its value. The text highlights what we might call the holy trinity of zine culture. The editor, the reader, and the participant are all the exact same person.
Wow, yeah.
It doesn't need to dilute its message for a mainstream audience because it is the literal voice of the parties involved. In a culture that actively rejects traditional sterile recording, this highly personal medium steps in to act as a vital auxiliary device for memory.
That makes so much sense. They couldn't capture the lasers or the smoke on film, so they had to go home the next morning, grab a pen, and physically force those memories onto paper before the exhaustion set in and the details faded.
Precisely. The zine becomes the primary mechanism to reconstruct a nonverbal experience after the fact.
But what does that actually look like on the page? I mean, knowing how these things were frantically assembled is one thing, but what exactly was inside them that makes MMR treat them like the Rosetta Stone of dance music in 2025?
Well, the article provides a detailed inventory of how these creators managed to translate a multi-sensory, massive-scale experience into stark black and white paper.
Yeah, they reproduced the flyers. That stood out to me immediately.
Yes, a huge element.
Because taking photos of the DJ or the crowd was taboo, the promotional flyer handed out weeks in advance was often the only surviving visual art tied to a specific party. By pasting that flyer directly into the zine, they were effectively preserving the visual language, the typography, and the chaotic graphic design of the era.
Then you have the on-site essays. These were not, polished academic reviews of the music.
Right.
They're raw, visceral attempts to capture the feeling of the physical vibrations on the club floor. They describe the humidity of the room, the specific atmosphere of navigating an illegal warehouse. They were actively trying to invent a new vocabulary to describe an experience that was inherently nonverbal.
And they also meticulously recorded the set lists, which is just a goldmine for modern music
Oh,
historians.
absolutely.
Zines would list the specific DJ names, the exact track orders, the overall energetic flow of the music from midnight to 6 a.m. Without those written lists, we would have literally no idea what records were actually spinning in those rooms.
None at all.
And beyond the music, the article notes that Zines were used to share the gritty, logistical realities of the night.
Yeah, that included documenting the intense social tension of the era. Writers would detail their specific drug experiences, the complex logistics of finding the secret party location, and the realities of evading police checkpoints on the way home.
Which, again, just to reiterate for our listeners, we're sharing as neutral historical facts based on the source text.
Exactly. The text presents these anecdotes purely as factual elements of historical record keeping. The creators were simply recording the reality of their environment because nobody else was doing it.
It was pure, unfiltered cultural documentation. And the MMR article grounds all this theory by pointing us to actual surviving real-world archives that listeners can look up right now. Like, for example, over in Germany, there was a highly influential zine called Dataside.
Yes, Dataside is a perfect example of the intellectual depth embedded in this culture. The article notes it focused heavily on subgenres like psychcore and breakcore.
Which, for listeners who might not know, are incredibly abrasive, ultra-fast, aggressive styles of electronic music. We're talking 200 beats per minute, distorted kick drums, just complete sensory overload.
It's intense. And yet, Dataside didn't just review that aggressive music. It wove those abrasive genres into much broader political and critical contexts. It paired the intense, chaotic soundtrack of the underground with serious, long-form cultural critique.
Then you look over at the UK, and you have the Rave flyer archives, which the text notes did a brilliant job of combining those iconic, colorful 90s graphic flyers with deeply personal, retrospective essays from the people who were actually on the dance floor.
And in North America, the text highlights the Rave archive.
Oh, yeah.
Founded in 2007 by an archivist and former raver named Ernie Villalobos, this project specifically focuses on hunting down and preserving old-school rave flyers and zine excerpts from across the U.S. and Canada, meticulously spanning the golden era from 1989 all the way to 2000.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If you look at the broader scope of what Ernie Villalobos, the Dataside creators, and these UK archivists were doing, we are looking at these incredibly scattered, localized, fragile pieces of paper.
Very fragile.
Someone cutting up magazines in a basement in Germany, someone else at a midnight copy shop in the UK, another person stapling pages in Canada. None of them were coordinating with each other. They had no central database, yet collectively, they managed to crowdsource a comprehensive global history of a secret world.
It really stands as a stunning achievement of decentralized archiving.
Totally.
But looking at all this frantic paper pushing raises an important question for our current era. Why, when we have infinitely more efficient, globally connected ways to record our lives, does this MMR text argue so passionately for the enduring superiority of paper?
Right. Today, if I want to share my profound thoughts on a concert I just saw, I can open an app, type a paragraph, and instantly publish it to a global audience in 3 seconds.
Yep.
Takes zero money and zero physical effort. So why does this article place physical paper on such a high pedestal?
Well, the article dives into a fascinating side-by-side comparison of modern digital media versus the traditional paper zine, exploring how the medium itself changes the value of the memory. It starts with the illusion of digital permanence.
Oh man, this completely shifted my perspective when I read it.
It's a wake-up call.
It really is. The text argues that digital media is actually incredibly fragile. We think the internet is forever, but a website goes down, a link rots, a server gets wiped, or a platform changes its terms of service, and entire communities just vanish instantly.
It's just gone.
Paper, on the other hand, is remarkably stubborn. As long as it doesn't catch fire or get thrown in the trash, that zine remains a semi-permanent physical object demanding space in the real world.
And that physical presence ties directly into the concept of scarcity. Digital files are infinitely copyable. You can duplicate a photo a million times, and it costs nothing, which inherently devalues the image.
Yeah, that's true.
But a paper zine has a finite limited number of copies. The article argues that this strict limitation gives the zine the heavy, undeniable weight of physical evidence. If you're holding one of 50 existing copies of a 1994 Rave zine, you are holding a tangible, rare piece of history.
Then there's the physical ritual of sharing. Like, if I find an article today, I click a share button, and it silently pops up on 100 different screens.
Very passive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the text points out that sharing a zine required bodily action. You had to physically hand it to someone sweating on a dance floor, or write an address on an envelope, put a stamp on it, and mail it across the country. That physical transfer imbued the object with a sense of intention and meaning that a hyperlink just doesn't have.
The most crucial distinction, however, lies in the psychological mechanism of creation. Digital publishing is engineered to be entirely frictionless. Anyone can do it without a second thought. Making a zine requires tedious, often frustrating effort. You have to write the text by hand, cut out images, align them with glue, operate a loud, hot photocopier, and manually staple the binding.
It's the difference between tapping a screen and building a piece of furniture from scratch. You can literally feel the sweat and the intention soaked into the paper.
Exactly. And that physical friction acts as a cognitive anchor. The sheer effort forces the creator's brain to dwell on the memory, encoding it deeply. You are transferring the physical exhaustion of the dance floor into the physical exhaustion of creating the media.
Wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the central thesis of the MMR piece suddenly clicks into place perfectly. Just as the rave itself was a deeply physical, bodily experience, the heavy bass in your chest, the stamina required to dance until dawn in the zine serves as the perfect historical counterpart precisely because it is physical media.
It matches perfectly.
Yes, the medium matches the message. You cannot archive a purely physical, messy subculture in a sterile, frictionless digital cloud. It requires a medium that you can touch, smell, and physically pass from hand to hand.
So the format of the memory has to match the format of the experience. A sterile cloud server can't hold the memory of a sweaty underground warehouse.
It is a profound observation about how we choose to encode and remember our most intense cultural moments.
Okay, so what does this all mean? If we pull back and look at this entire cultural dark matter we've explored today through this MMR deep dive, zines were never meant to be polished commercial products.
No, definitely not.
They certainly aren't official government records or peer-reviewed academic texts. They are this beautiful, chaotic, deeply biased hybrid. They serve as part diary, part field report, part logistical survival guide, and part love letter to a fleeting moment in time.
Because they operate entirely outside the mainstream system, they succeed exactly where official records fail. They manage to capture the internal pulse and the raw emotion of a marginalized community.
And they allow future listeners, future dancers, and people like you and me sitting here today to rediscover the lost contours of a culture that, by its own strict rules, was never supposed to be recorded in the first place.
Right.
They save the rave by refusing to let the memory evaporate.
It forces a massive shift in how you view the disposable artifacts of your own life, I think. Which leaves me with a thought I'd like you to ponder long after we finish today. Think about your own life right now. Think about the deeply meaningful, transient, here and now moments you experience with your friends, your community, or your family. Are you trusting the memory of those vital moments entirely to fragile, easily deleted digital spaces?
That's a scary thought.
Or is there something in your life right now, something truly important, that deserves the tedious effort of being pulled out of the cloud and turned into undeniable physical evidence, your own personal zine?
Man, that is an incredibly powerful question to walk away with. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Whether you are currently building an underground archive or just trying to figure out how to remember a great night out without staring at your phone, we hope this conversation gave you a completely new perspective on how we hold on to the things that truly matter. Take care, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.